say Alfred Hitchcock was one of the most influential directors of all times would probably be an understatement. Clearly, he was one of the greatest directors of all time. And therefore, he knows how to make amazing movies. And Hitchcock was quoted as saying, "To make a great movie, you need three things: the script, and the script." That's my really poor job of an Alfred Hitchcock impersonation. Forgive me for that part. When we watch a movie, what we're doing is we're watching the vision of a director being told. But for that director to be able to share their vision in their film, they had to have their eyes opened by a screenwriter. He's the screenwriter that first puts on paper the story that we are going to be fascinated with. It is that screenwriter's vision, that screenwriter that takes that original thought and sends us a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, where good fights evil. Or the screenwriter who is able to take 500 pages of one of America's great authors, Stephen King, and a book like The Shining, and put it into a slightly over 2-hour film. That is the art of a screenwriter. The screenwriter who spends all of her time with this. Kentucky native George Clooney once said, "I can take a good script and make a bad movie, but I can't take a bad script and make a good movie." It is the screenplay that is going to determine everything on the success of a film. If you have a bad script, you're going to have a bad film. It is important then that we have good screenwriters. Gentlemen, our next guest is Carl Ellsworth, an accomplished screenwriter who has given us Red Eye, Disturbia, Last House on the Left, Red Dawn, and most recently, the Russell Crowe horror thriller Unhinged. Guys, welcome to another episode of Film Nation, this time, the art of the screenplay. All right, guys, welcome back to our class again. And today's guest is screenwriter Carl Ellsworth. Now, Carl has been the screenwriter of Red Eye, Disturbia, and his most recent film is Unhinged, starring Russell Crowe, which is out in theaters.
Like I have this perfectly framed behind me here. It's just for this. No.
So thank you again for joining us, Carl.
Yeah. Hey guys.
So I really, really appreciate it, and this is means a lot to us.
Of course, my pleasure. As long as disclaimer that they know I'm a St. X graduate. I hope that doesn't put you off of this.
All right. Well, people get smarter in their older age.
You know what they do. I've I've had some what they call a character arc through, and I've realized the error of my ways. No, what do I say?
So, we won't hold this against you.
No, but no, seriously, I love it. Happy to talk to you all. Absolutely.
All right. Now, the guys in class, due to their English classes, have had to read numerous novels. And a novel is going to take sometimes pages to describe just the room setup, like the rain was drumming on the windows and things of that sort. I mean, just pages and pages of description, just even what a room set up and the person's wearing. A screenwriter doesn't have that kind of luxury. Matter of fact, you got to be writing it real quick. Can you can you share us the difference of the process of writing screenplay, and so that they can get an understanding of that instead of what a novel would look like?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I've never attempted writing a novel. It's like I only know from reading them. It's like, yes, what you said is very true. Of course, it's novels themselves go into some oftentimes elaborate description and really painting the picture. And screenplays have their own very specific format to them. And I would say that I don't know if it's right to say that screenplay writing is almost like the polar opposite of writing a novel. You only have It's very strange, actually. I'm not sure how long the format's been around a long time with very few tweaks to it. But they quickly realized that a page of a script generally equals 1 minute of screen time. It's weird how it works out that way. So really, that's why screenplays average anywhere from 90 to 120 pages. An hour and a half to 2 hour movie. The thinking is after that, it's like audiences kind of tend to the attention span tends to drift and all that. So yes, you only have so much real estate on the page to get across what you're trying to say, and also the pictures you're trying to paint. I'd say the key in screenplays and screenwriting is to really the challenge is to paint that picture with as few words as possible to convey the images you're wanting to convey to the reader, and that in itself is the challenge to try to because before you know it, you're sometimes eating up pages, but you need to make your point very quickly, especially it's amazing. I don't know any statistics on novels, but there are many screenplays and written every year by professionals, by people trying to kind of try it out, and so what happens is you're competing for the attention of the studio executives and producers who can do something with your script, presumably. And let's also say that they're, talk about attention spans. Well, they're your first audience. And it's like there's this kind of saying out there where if you don't grab the reader in the first 10 pages, a lot of times they throw your script down like, okay, next. And so, yeah, it is a challenge on both those fronts, which is to really convey as much as you can in as few words as possible. And it can be a fun challenge too. It's because there's sometimes where I tend to sort of, first of all, overwrite things, and then I go back like, wait a minute, I could say this in about 4 words instead of 8. And it's kind of becomes fun ultimately, but so yes. And then because also the key is to keep you want your, again, I was just thinking about this the other day, your first audience. I always try to keep my audience in mind. In this case, your first audience, whether a novel or a screenplay, is your reader. Right. And it scares the heck out of me to think that I don't want anyone to give them any reason to put this down. Right. And so that's where the challenge begins. How can you grab them in those first few pages, and then how do you keep their attention? And a lot of that is a result of just keeping the flow going. And I think as you guys, I don't know if you've studied the format or not, but it kind of like where the dialogue itself is right down the center of the page in its own kind of column. So oftentimes it's like, and the description is in the wider margins, across the page. And so, but sometimes your people who are reading it will just skim through it and just read the dialogue. It's like they miss some of the direction. So anyway, I know it's a long-winded answer, but yes, that is a big primary difference between novels, books, and screenplay format and screenwriting.
Okay, yeah, because you also, as a screenwriter, have to even know just the art of filmmaking too, because you're, as a screenwriter, giving in essence suggestions of like what the shot would be like and things of that sort. Correct?
Yeah, generally it's there's have been various schools of thoughts on that over the years, but like, do you include camera directions and things like that? You don't really want to get too specific. There are little tricks that I use sometimes to put emphasis on at least a way that I might shoot the scene. Okay. Like literally, it just amounts to if you say Jim puts the book on the desk, and if I happen to capitalize the word book, that means I really want to emphasize that's important. It puts and so yeah, capitalizing is, but I never want to. Sometimes I'll say the camera drifts through the room or something, but very rarely, or we drift through the room. But there's, one thing I say though is when I talk to actually kids who are going to screenwriting school, they oftentimes tell me about these kind of rules that they've learned, or they've been told. It's like, absolutely do not use the word, like the phrase is, we move through the room, Slowly we move through there. Well, you know, I'd say it's like that might be, but I do that. You know, I use it sometimes sparingly. So, but yes, I'd say it's sort of there are the rules that you might come across, but kind of look at them, but yet with a sort of like, okay, with an eye toward, well, it's sort of more of suggestions than rules of this of screenwriting.
Okay. Now, in your screenwriting experiences, you've done both original work, such as Red Eye and Unhinged, but you've also done adapted work, such as you did the remake of Last House on the Left and Red Dawn. What is the difference in writing something that was your own original inspired work versus taking somebody else's work and adapting it into a new vision? And how challenging are those styles?
Yeah, it's well, the difference is when you're writing something original, when you start out and you've have the initial idea and you're able to crack it into a 3-act movie that you're pretty excited about, you know, that thing is yours. That is your baby. It's your thing. I'll just use the case of Red Dawn, for example. That, you know, but how it works is kind of have to write something original initially to kind of get yourself, you know, through the doors where then people will consider you to write things that they're looking to get made. In that case, it was the MGM, the studio. They, you know, produced the first Red Dawn, and they're like, "Hey, we want to remake this for at the time it was like 2009 or 10." And so what they do is they go out to several writers around town, and they say, "Hey, we're doing this. You know, come up with your ideas for it. Come up with a pitch or a take on it,
Okay.
and come in and blow us away with your vision."
All right.
And so yeah, so that's how it works generally. And that's how I've actually gotten most of my, you know, and worked most of my jobs in between Red Eye and Unhinged, which span about 15 years. Had to do with my getting of these writing, taking these writing assignments, and it's very much like auditioning for a job, where, you know, you're up against you know, potentially 4, 5, 6 other people. You have no idea who they are.
Oh, wow.
Who've gone into the rooms with these Hollywood executives who are all sitting around a table. Sometimes it can be jovial and a happy experience, but other times people are just staring at you, just, you know, with just this poker faces.
Okay.
And it's the most terrifying experience, at least for me.
Yeah.
And but yeah, but generally you're trying to fit the vision of potentially several other people, several other, you know, cooks in the future kitchen. That will be the movie getting made, as opposed to when you're writing something original, it's your thing, you control it's yours until it's not, until hopefully somebody, you know, you get it out there and hopefully somebody picks it up, purchases it, and decides to make the movie. Writing on assignment is different, is very different in that you're hired to then write the screenplay based on the pitch that you have come up with for that particular studio or production company, and then you develop and you write sometimes 2 or more drafts of the script to hopefully get it to where they were hoping it could get to. I think it's a tricky target to hit, but when it happens, you also end up with a movie getting made, hopefully. So.
And I mean, at that point, I would say, is there a sense of relief, or does it become even more stressful knowing that it got picked up?
You mean knowing that the movie is getting made, or?
Yes. Like, is that a sense of relief, or does it become like, oh my gosh, now my vision is being picked up?
Yes. Well, then it becomes, you know, it's you know, movie making, first and foremost, everybody, is a collaborative art form. It is a collaboration of many hundreds, let's say, of artists with and generally in features, though, with the director is the captain of the ship, where I say, you know, writers, you know, you're all powerful at the keyboard, but then once it goes into a director in a studio and things start to happen and actors start to come on and money starts to get spent, you become generally the most you're on standby, but you don't really have too much of a say unless you're also a producer at the same time. But for me, the stress, it's kind of like there are moments of like, relief, or you turn in a script and they liked it enough. But I always dread getting, feedback and notes that they'll give you, and you have to immediately, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm a fraud. I didn't do this. I really screwed this up, and they hate me and I'll never work again. And then I'll turn it in. They love it. And it's like, it's an emotional roller coaster all the time. And it doesn't, it's a fascinating experience, especially when you get, a movie that's being made from your script. And you do, of course, when you write it, you have these, you have to envision the movie, very deeply in your mind, in your head. You at least where I'm concerned, I vividly see it. And of course, though, it's like that, the director doesn't, even if he could, he wouldn't plug a wire into my brain or something to get that vision out. They do their own thing. And so it's funny, like it's funny as writers, or sometimes like it's ultimately like I love the fact. I mean, Unhinged, it's like getting a movie made. It's fantastic. It's the dream, but of course there's inevitably they did this or they did that, and it's so funny how we're all kind of I was talking to another writer the other day. She had written a big action movie, and I told her I was a big fan of it, and she immediately starts to tell me what disappointed her about it. As opposed to it was a very successful thing. So, because that's the result, that's just the nature of it. But by and large, it's like I'm, mostly I look at all my projects as really, by and large, capturing very much the essence, and many times, in many cases, the vision of what I had in mind, and many cases, sometimes better than what I envisioned. So yeah. I forgot the original question. I don't know if I've circled back. What was the original question?
Well, no, you've definitely done it. Now I actually have some more questions based off it because actually I have two really questions I really want to follow up with because you're talking about what it's like going to the director. So and you're also talking about how things get changed when it goes to the director. So let me go to the first director you worked with in your first feature film, which is Red Eye, the horror thriller of 2005, directed by the iconic, legendary horror visionary Wes Craven.
Now, your students still know, how old were they in 2005? So that's kind of scary to think about.
They were probably, at this point, a couple of years old. So they weren't seeing it in the theater. But so you did get to work with one of the great iconic horror directors with Wes Craven. So your very first feature film is with Wes Craven. What was that experience like?
Oh my goodness. It was interesting because I was so fascinated that he, first of all, that he signed on to it based on the movies that I had seen. And just to let your students know, it's like up until that point, he was, again, will always be known as if not he was the master of horror movies. Right. And at that point, I had never seen, the Nightmare on Elm Street, and I'd seen Scream, in the Scream films. And so I really, hadn't seen a lot, but also at the same time, it was at a point in his career where he was looking to do more. He wanted to do a psychological thriller. Okay. And so meeting him, it was a very, very good working relationship. Great. He had a lot of great ideas. At one point, like he took the script and he wrote a version of it. And then it got back to me, and we worked with the studio through developing the script but again, and then on the set, I refer to Wes Craven as just the consummate, just old, he's an old pro and not an age, just a pro that just knew his audience and knew what he wanted. And, where there were times where he would, have make choices I would be kind of quietly panicked about. But then ultimately, when you see it in the movie theater, it's these moments, it's these classic Wes Craven moments that get the biggest reaction. And of course, I take full credit. Yes, of course, that was in the script, and that was me. That was my brilliance. But no, it was amazing. It was amazing first experience, and working with the people involved, from Wes Craven to still his producing partner, his longtime producing partner, Marianne Madalena. And if and it went so well that how it happened, and to let your students know kind of how it works out there. Thankfully, the movie turned out good, and then It did well in theaters at the box office, and so what that does is that raises a writer's clout. You're like, okay, and you kind of start to, your stock goes up,
Right.
and then that would lead to my next assignment jobs on both Disturbia, and then Wes Craven came back to me for his remake of his original Last House on the Left. Right. Which again, I had never seen. I had never seen that thing. And when they told me, but that was a thing where they had already had a script. They sent it to me. They basically said, and Marianne said, what would you do with this? And also, while I watched the original movie, and it's like I could hardly watch it. It's not my thing. It was not my thing at all. But we can, if you want to talk about that, I'm happy to. But it was, but anyway, point being is that's how also kind of your a potential track of continuing to be a working writer, and thankfully, some bullseyes were hit with Red Eye in terms of it, again, the movie turning out, doing well at the box office, and so on and so on. But again, I miss it. It was a great experience, and it was awesome. It's very cool. Okay. And now I have seen Nightmare on Elm Street now, so
it's one of the great horror classic.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it was funny too. It's like, because I think, it was so interesting that Wes, and looking back, it's like he, I don't know even know if it was not his game plan to become, the master of horror, and I think he, in a way, but he embraced it, and my goodness, for his body of work, it's just second to none.
Yeah. Now, you've hinted on it a couple times, and this was that other follow-up I was wanting to do with you, is you've shared sometimes the vision of a writer gets changed by the director or a studio. And one of my thoughts go back to, now, I mean, I have not watched every episode of Family Guy, but one of my favorite episodes of Family Guy, Brian has a script. It is picked up by a studio. They start doing some test screenings. They bring in Elijah Wood, and the story premise was going to be this young working dad, single dad raising his child. And Brian's like all excited because they're going to run with Elijah Wood. But then the studio execs are like, hey, let's bring in James Woods for a moment. And so who's much older. And then the script gets mutated a little more by the studio. Well, now James Woods is going to live in his dorm with his adult, college roommate daughter, and they're going to have a pet monkey. And instead of being a serious drama, it's going to be this slapstick comedy. And Brian is heartbroken that his vision was ripped from him in front of his own eyes. Yeah. As a screenwriter, whether in your credits on television or in film, has there been something that's either a studio or the actor or the director's vision that they went with, you're like, that wasn't necessarily my vision? And if that's the case, emotionally, how do you deal with it, knowing that your name's hooked to it, but even though it's not necessarily the vision you had?
I would say that not in a major way, like in this because I've certainly met writers and talked with writers who actually have never seen, have refused to watch movies that have their name on it because they're so obsessed about the finished product. And I can, thankfully, that has never happened to me, where it's even with everything everything being said, but it's I've always been generally quite pleased. And again, because and the more I've been through the process, the more I realize, man, movie making and screenwriting and the movie making, it's just to put it very simply, is hard. It is very hard. It is the system, and I don't think it's really designed for success. I'm amazed that there are as many great and good movies as there are. And I say that really with great respect for everyone who makes films. That being said, I think certainly there have been several, many, it's like smaller instances in every movie I've done where I'm like, oh, I wish this had been done, or this has happened, or this or that. And yes, it's disappointing. It's certainly disappointment, and it is emotional, because if you're not, I think, emotionally attached or invested in your work to begin with, then I don't think it's going to show on the page. It's going to come across as not authentic or not or phony in a way, to for lack of a better word. So of course, it's only natural for writers to become emotionally in touch. Writers, I think you have to be in touch with a certain, even sometimes deep of your emotions to make yourself go there and to make whatever it is you're doing feel real. And I mean that it can feel real in a real world setting. It can feel real in a galaxy far, far away, but you've got to be true to it, and it's got to sound real to the reader as they read it. You know, like in the case of Unhinged, there were certainly moments where I'm like, oh, I wish this moment had landed better, or, but also there's stuff where I'm like, oh my gosh, they did that, and wow, that really turned out. And so I'd say that but for me, and I have to kind of check myself though to again and tell your students, like, you know, consider myself very grateful and lucky and fortunate to just to have the chance to see your movie get made and in the way that it was. And I try to be there, even though of course I come home and I'm like any writer, I complain and gripe and moan, and usually my wife is on the receiving end of it, and she hears me crying in my well, not my beer, my soup or whatever I want. So yes, not my beer, no, or my wine maybe. So yes, but to your point, of course, it's emotional. It's like, and it sucks when somebody calls you up, or it's like where I've been actually replaced as a writer on a movie. You know, I got that call actually on Red Dawn, where they called me up. They say, and this happens all the time. This is just a very typical occurrence where, you know, sometimes you see on the screen multiple people credited with writing a movie. Right. And so, you know, yeah, it's, you know, I guess, you know, writers get hired and fired all the time. And I certainly am no exception, and it never feels good. It never feels good to, you know, to have somebody critique your work and all that. So, but even, and I tell people, even with where, you know, the success I've had, it never, every time I sort of brace myself for getting notes and getting the feedback. And because, you know, Chad, even you going to, you know, say you saw Unhinged, I absolutely, you know, did you enjoy it? It's like, oh boy, you know, or do you still want to do the interview with me today? I really, it's weird. It's like writers, we're so weird sometimes, because we're kind of, what do they call us? We're sort of, we're egomaniacs with oh gosh, inferiority complexes. That's how strange we are. That's
a drastic span.
Because you also kind of have to tell yourself, even to write one of these, a script, and to think that someone's going to take an hour and a half out of their day to read your it's like, it takes a little bit of, you know, yeah, courage, let's say, and ego is certainly a part of that too. But oh yeah, it's crazy.
So there is vulnerability as a writer, because you're in essence putting yourself into the script. And just when I did see Unhinged this past week here, your character Kyle, the son in the film, is talking to his mom about a new strategy that he has with his uncle in the game Fortnite. Now, last week when you and I were talking, we were talking about our own strategies with Fortnite and the way you play the game with your son. So immediately I drew this connection, and I wondered, I was like, is like when you put things like that in the film, is that coming from your own personal winks to like your family and things? Is this script really a part of who you are as a person? I mean, or was that just a mere coincidence that Kyle's playing Fortnite? And
no, here, not a coincidence at all. It's absolutely, first of all, yes, it is certainly a wink and a nod to my experience with my family and my 10-year-old son. I have a 2.5-year-old little girl, and of course, so yes, for me, things like that. One of my MOs in my writing, and again, is I'm all about relatability. And as real and as everyday. I'm really a fan of, generally my movies are about you know, everyday people, your neighbor, your friends, caught up in these extraordinary hellacious circumstances. And so, but I remember with that, with the Fortnite reference, which said, yes, my son is a fanatic, he's got me into it. I think I'm great at the game when I'm really not. But I asked it because I was also looking to somehow, part of screenwriting, and I didn't really focus on this until my Red Eye script got picked up at DreamWorks, and I learned so much from the executives there and what they were focused on.
Okay.
One thing is called setups and payoffs. If you ever notice, there are many, many things in I think the more successful films that are quietly set up or sort of almost subconsciously set up somewhere around the opening of the movie that are then called back to later in the movie. And like, oh, that's cool. How they did that. And so that came out of, I felt I needed one of these setups and payoffs to somehow play into, the final strategy that they use at the end of the movie. And so that's how it kind of all came together. And then, of course, I had to consult my son about, at the time, Fortnite has now been updated, 18,000 times.
Right.
So even the locations, I don't even know, they don't have golf carts in the game anymore, but they used to. And so at the time, it was up to date. But yes, it all started from, again, my own, certainly there's my own experiences and my own sometimes views of the world that they'd come across. I jokingly, I think I half jokingly tell people that I'm not the a cup is half full person generally. I generally wake up basically weighting myself to like what's going to come around the corner to just mess up my day, just to get in my way. Who's going to need something or who's going to do this or that? And so that's also kind of that's what I bring to my stories too. Is in this case, it's like what is kind of the worst day anyone could ever have. And
our hero, our final girl in Unhinged, as Russell Crowe very early on says, you're about to have a bad day. Yeah, it's going to be a very bad day. So
yes, yeah. And it was a matter of now making myself go there emotionally, and also the things he does that they were sometimes tough to write. And I even think that the director made it even more visceral and more graphic in ways that actually surprised me. In ways, but
So I have students, and some of them might be sitting here, and after this conversation, they enjoy writing and stuff like that. They might be like, "Hey, maybe this is something I'd want to do." As a very experienced screenwriter with much acclaim to your name and a lot of success, what kind of advice would you give to a guy in class that is possibly interested in learning how to be a screenwriter for television and film?
It's at the risk of sounding kind of giving like the pat answer, it's like just you've got to it's here it's there, here it is right here. Here's the keyboard right here, and there's a screen in front of me, and you just have to just start somewhere and start writing. But also with regard to the, I very much believe in the, and constantly learning that, there's a craft to any kind of writing, and screenwriting is no, exception. I would say it's like, you study the format, read some sample screenplays. I would say for even more recent screenplays, just to kind of get an idea of how it's done. But also, but for me, it's also watch movies. I'm constantly watching and rewatching movies. I've been obsessed with movies forever, and because for me, I realized that a big part of writing is actually developing an ear for many things. Like there's a certain movies in a way, and again, first of all, I know nothing about music. For example, it's like I have no idea how it's put together, but I know that, and my wife, who's a musician, has told me there's certain methods to the madness there. There's certain things that just kind of have to fit together. And the same is true, I believe, for movies. You'll find that, each movie you can pretty much break it down into 3 acts. And then each of those acts have certain points that all of I think the movies that work hit in certain respects. Many times they're not obvious. And many times they're invisible, but if you really break it down and you go and you study, it's like, oh, that's where the person at the end of the second act usually is, where, for example, the character is in the dumps. Like it's what I call, it's the all is lost moment.
Okay, yeah.
So there's moments like that, but again, for me, it came out of mostly watching and hearing movies and sort of developing, and from that, because and developing your ear for rhythm. There is rhythm to movies, at least that I think that work. And then to that, movies are very, in terms of that 3-act, I forgot one word in that, it's called the 3-act structure. stories, the stories for movies are very structured things. You know, in the case of, you know, Unhinged or Red Dawn, for example, you know, you have, you know, what's the, you know, in your first act, you know, with you know, you have the invasion. That is what, you know, the inciting incident, which is, you know, what's the thing that propels your character into action?
Right.
You know, Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's like, you know, we've got to go. You know, the Nazis have discovered Tanis, where the Lost Ark. We need you to get there first. You know,
Right.
It's that one. So generally, every movie has this.
Yes.
And so again, it's studying, and for me, it's still kind of maintaining the ear for that. For me, it's kind of fun in many ways, because a lot of times, sometimes when I watch movies, like, oh, okay, I study them almost too much to see, but also, yeah, for me, writing is just as much hearing,
Okay.
not only voices in your head, so to speak, and how everybody speaks, but also the rhythm of movies. And again, to your students, you know, pick the movies that you love. What do you love? What works for you? What are your favorite films? And what do you know, if your thing is, if you're a fan of Quentin Tarantino, or if you're a comedy person, something, it's like, study those and see what you like about them, and what you don't like, and maybe you might want to try it differently. Because my thing also, it's like, you know, with your first screenplay, it's like, you know, it's not about reinventing the wheel, so to speak. It's about, you know, kind of taking something and maybe putting a twist on it or an angle on it or something. But my first thing is, don't worry about it being a masterpiece because your first time out, because it's not. Your first script is going to suck. It's just going to be. It's like I wrote my first one in college, and I will never show it to anyone. You know, it's terrible, and I was like, I can't believe. But at the time, oh man, this is good. But yeah, it's as kind of straightforward as that to start, you know. But I wouldn't, you know, go and spend a lot of money on how to screenwriting books and all this.
Okay.
You know, you have your streaming services. If you pay $9 a month, then you can watch movies until you're blue in the face. And if you have a few scripts to read, just to get an idea of what they look like,
Okay.
and how they read, and then, but also then developing your own, I think, style and voice of how you describe things in as few words as possible, as opposed to the next person who might be writing. So that's my initial advice. Just how to get started. You start typing,
and just practice it and practice it and practice it, knowing that.
Yes. Yeah, and I'd say that also, it's like, I don't think the majority of my time is actually, only I have to kind of, an addendum here, is spent typing. For me, I have to sort of, once I crack the story, like for Unhinged as an example, I started writing the script, and then on page 45, I couldn't get past it. I couldn't figure out the rest of it. I kind of had some ideas, and it took me forever to what they call crack the third act, to figure out what happened and how, you know, I knew the characters had to turn the tables on the bad guy.
Right.
I had no idea how that was going to happen. I had no idea. And so, but eventually, so a lot of my time actually is spent really, I guess, talking to myself and thinking. And well, before COVID, you know, wandering around Target or Best Buy, you know, kind of, but thinking, I realized it's in driving my car. I do a lot of thinking about that and trying to figure it out in my head. And more often than not, the solution comes. But so, and then I can feel more comfortable typing. But sometimes also it's like, you just got to start typing too. It's like, you know, and deadlines help with that too. So,
I know it is a motivator for
procrastinating. It's like, I can always think of something better to do than write. I just, you know, so.
Well, I would think a number of my students probably are very similar with that kind of position there, because, you know, deadlines of, and they have other options that they would rather do. Yes.
Oh, because here's the thing. It's writing is scary. You have to, because what has to happen after you write? You have to be judged. You have to show it to somebody, and you're a teacher, you're a professor, and they, you know, it's wrenching. You know, you're putting yourself out there, and no one likes to be told what they've done wrong or this is horrible. It's like what they've done. But But it's all part of it as well. And I think that's the number one thing. As I've talked to young writers over too many years now, it's like that it's like you've got to also finish it. Get that, because also there's nothing better than a finished script in your hand. To the feeling of that, it's great. Of course, when it's still yours and you haven't shown it to somebody, that's when it's just magic and it's great. But then you've got to put yourself out there and you got to be judged. And I'm telling you, no, it does not get any easier. You just hope that someone is brilliant enough to realize your vision and to not give you too many criticisms. But no, but you were asking about what it's like when a movie gets made. No, it was like, of course, I obsess on Rotten Tomatoes, and when I see the reviews, it's like, and then it starts all over again. You know, it's like, Carl, great, we love your script, we're going to make the movie. They make the movie, and then the movie comes out, and people like hate it and throw in everything at it and saying this. It's like, it's terrible. It's like, it's so. But then, of course, I try to harp again, always kind of come back from the dark side, Carl, and go and, hey, you know, the movie, you're proud of the movie. It turned out the way that you thought it would. And we got a good response the other day from, I'd say William Friedkin, the director of The Exorcist, tweeted at our director telling him how much he enjoyed it and how much he liked the villain. And I'm like, okay, great.
Great.
You know.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so Carl, we're going to wrap this up with a segment we call 5 Quick Questions.
Oh
so
my gosh,
it's
okay.
just first things that come to your mind, just boom, 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 boom. All right.
This is where writers cringe, like, okay, what's the perfect answer here? How can I? Oh boy,
Doesn't have to be
okay.
perfect.
Can I pass? Can I pass on it?
Think of it like Family Feud style of the final Family Feud.
All right, this is fun. Okay, try me.
All right. Your IMDb page, your first credit, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. What was that experience like?
Dream come true for about 3 weeks, and then utter disaster and nightmarish when they fired me.
Critics.
Necessary. You know, I'm good at what they very good at what they do. I don't disagree with them, but also it's like, man, part of me is also like, hey, you all try this sometime. You know?
Screenplay you're most proud of?
Oh boy, you know, now it's like I would have said Red Eye a few weeks ago, but now it's Unhinged. I'm really good because it took me forever to write another original script, and then it was like pulling teeth. My wife actually made me do it. She's like, I'm sick of hearing this. I'm sick of hearing this idea. Will you write it? You need to write it, and I'm very proud of it. Having done it, because it was in my head for so long. And I'm glad I got it out of my head. And now I'm glad I got it out there for people to check it out.
Screenplay that you wish you could revisit and change, and why?
Screenplay I could revisit. Okay. I don't know. There was, you know, I have to say that I thought the script for Red Dawn and one of its drafts that I did, I was really proud of, and really kind of, there are things I wish I could go back and have some of those things kind of reinserted into the movie.
All right, and final one, your go-to snack when you're on a writer's block?
Snack, well, first of all, I can tell you drink, and it's like I've been a Mountain Dew addict for forever, which is terrible for you. So it's usually Mountain Dew and something, maybe a cheese stick or something, or Doritos or something. Oh my gosh, you name it. Basically, it's called go up to the refrigerator and just do this, and then watch what happens, and then oh my god, yeah. But I try to stick with the 0-calorie iced teas. Caffeine is just it keeps me going. I've only become a coffee guy recently, and I'm telling you, it's like I call it getting coffee drunk. I had no idea. It makes me coffee, at least in the first 15 minutes after, it's like I can do anything. Anything is possible in the world. It's like, it's so great. It's like, yes, what? Yes, want me to change my 2-year-old's diaper? Of course, let me know, do it. I can do it. Yeah.
Carl, thank you so much for being a part of our class. Really appreciate it. Good luck with your future scripts.
Absolutely, Ted. No, thank you very much. This has been really fun. I hope helpful to your students, and hopefully one of these days be able to drop by in person and answer any questions in person or something. I'm always happy to do it. And always happy to find out also for my own job. It's like, what's the latest thing? What are kids into today? What are they writing about? What interests them? So cool
Thank
deal.
you, Carl.
Thanks, Chad.
Carl, thank you so much for being a part of this class and sharing your experiences as a very successful screenwriter with us. Steven Spielberg, right there, one of the tenants of blockbuster summer hits and creator of Jaws, shared that, you know, audiences are harder to please if you're just giving them effects, but they're really easy to please if you give them a good story. Guys, screenwriting is about giving us a good story. Hope you enjoyed the class. Thank you for being a part of it. And as always, guys, remain awesome, be nice, stay safe, and I will see you soon. Catch you later, guys.